You're listening to the weekly Parsha Podcast with Ari Goldwag, recorded with Hashem's never-ending assistance in Ramat Beit Shemesh, Israel, 5781, 2021. This week's Parsha is Parsha Shemos. We begin this week the Sefer of Shemos, the book of Exodus, the Sefer HaGeula, the book of redemption, which represents something that we remember every single day, Yetzias Mitzrayim, the Exodus from Egypt, and it's the core of who we are as Jews. It's the core of who we are as a nation and also who we are as individuals. And there's some amazing and powerful concepts here that are so important to understand, and I think speak to us right now where we are. I don't know about exactly where you are, but I'm in Eretz Yisrael. I'm in the land of Israel, and the Jewish people once again are under a tremendous seger, a lockdown, can't leave our homes, can't go very far if we do. And so we find ourselves in a time of challenge, in a time of difficulty. A challenge with our children, a challenge to maintain our sanity, a challenge with our parnasa, with our livelihood. And we need to face off with this, and we need to understand what is the lesson. And I think in our parsha we have a very powerful explanation, a powerful understanding of how to think about and to face off with challenges, to understand that everything, of course, everything that Hashem does is for our good. But not just the good things are for our good. The things that are challenges are not just, okay, we got to get through them, get to the other side. But rather the very challenges themselves represent the opportunity for growth, something greater than they seem on the surface. This is something which is expressed very succinctly and clearly by our Chazal. The Torah describes the fact that the Jewish people, after all of those of the generation who came down to Egypt, after they all passed on, so the Jewish people were made to become slaves. They became slaves to Paro, to Pharaoh, and the Egyptians. Pasuk says something amazing. Kasher ya'anu oisai, ken yirbeh v'chen yifreitz. To the degree that they would be subjected to difficult times, to the degree that they were subjected to great pain and difficulty, in a corresponding way they would become great, and they would expand. So it's very interesting. The Medrash says something which just has to do with us. Kain rabu v'chein partzu lenemar. It doesn't say according to how much they were subjected to pain, so too that's how much they grew great and they expanded and had many children. In the future, it's future tense, they shall become great. They shall become expanded. Amar Reb Shimon ben Lakish. Reish Lakish says, one of the Amoraim in the times of the Talmud, Ruach HaKodesh mevasartan ken yirbeh v'chen yifreitz. There was a prediction, there was a prophetic prediction, which stated at the onset of the Jewish people, when the Jewish people first came into existence and went through their first galus, their first exile, Hashem promised something. That just as it was then, that the difficulties and the challenges of the Jewish people experienced unmatched, unparalleled difficulties and challenges. And it caused them to become greater. It caused them to become stronger. It caused them to become many. So too it shall be throughout history. All of the times that the Jewish people continue to see and to experience challenges and difficulties, those challenges will result in an expansion, in a becoming great. It wasn't just in the past. So that's a powerful foundation. When we think about why is it that the Jewish people throughout history, or specifically the story of the Exodus, why was it that the Jewish people had to experience this tremendous difficulty? Why did they have to go through this slavery? Why were they subjected to such dire conditions? And somehow the answer is that the Jewish people, because, not despite, but because of the challenges that they experienced, because of the slavery, because of their being degraded and under the heels of the Egyptians, because of that, they grew to greatness, they grew to prominence. This was true of Yosef HaTzadik, And this is true of the Jewish people in general. And this is also represented, it's not in this week's Parsha, I believe it's in next week's Parsha. Torah says, what represents the Jewish people is the moon. The moon represents us. Why? So there are other nations that also, the Islamic nations, they follow the moon. They have a lunar calendar. But what it represents for us, besides for the fact that we also follow a lunar calendar, what it represents for us is just as the moon has phases, it gets brighter and it gets darker. The Jewish people also have phases. And it's because of the darkness that we end up being full of light. It's not just like the sun that's always shining, but rather we go through the darkness, and we must go through the darkness in order to have the light. We have to have that. So now I'd like to share with you just an amazing and beautiful, such a beautiful Maimar Chazal, a medrash, that talks about this challenge, this difficulty, and how it resulted in an awesome revelation. You may or may not be familiar, I have a song, it's called Zeh Keili. The song, Baruch Hashem, has been heard many times, over 100,000 times, over 150,000 times. It's a beautiful song, a touching song. Zeh Keili, he believes in me, Hashem believes in me. Who Tamiditi is always with me. He's always with me. That's the concept of the song. But you may ask, Zeh Keili, we think of Zeh Keili, Vanveu, this is my God, I shall glorify him. Usually Zeh Keili means that I'm going to do a mitzvah, I'm going to do it in the right way, I'm going to have a beautiful talis, I'm going to have a beautiful lulav and esrog, I'm going to have a beautiful mezuzah. All the mitzvahs that we do, we beautify them. But there's a deeper pshat in Zeh Keili, which has to do with the fact that he believes in me. I'd like to share with you the makor, the source for this idea that I based the song on. It's based on this medrash that I'm about to teach you. I'm about to share with you. Arbik Zeres Gozar Parai. Based on this verse, the medrash tells us that in what way did they afflict us? In what way did they cause us anguish and pain? So there were 4 different gzeres, 4 different decrees that Pharaoh placed on the Jewish people. Pharaoh made a decree that the Jewish people should be in a very difficult situation. That they should have a very difficult quota to fill of bricks, of whatever it might be that they had to produce. What was the purpose of this? Why did they make such a difficult quota? So that they shouldn't sleep in their homes. He wanted them not to sleep at home. He wanted them to sleep out on the earth, in the field where they were working, in order that they shouldn't be able to return home and continue to produce more and more Jews. If they're not sleeping in their homes, so then they'll have kids. They won't have kids. So God says, I promised Abraham, their forefather, that there's going to be so many Jews, there's going to be as great as the stars. As many as the stars. Pasuk says in Bereshis, in Genesis chapter 22, verse 17, Hashem promises to Abraham, I'm going to make your children as great as the stars. Hashem is speaking, as it were, is speaking to the Egyptians, saying, you are going to prevent my children from having kids? This reminds me of the brothers with Yosef trying to sell him in order that he shouldn't rule over them. You think you guys are going to get rid of him? You think you guys are going to cause the Jewish people not to have children? We'll see whose matter is going to win out in the end. Your version of reality, you the Egyptians trying to prevent them from having children, or my version of reality. Okay, so what happens? I'm about to share with you. But before I share it with you, understand that the entire description that we're about to read of how indeed it was that even though the Egyptians tried to prevent them from having children, tried to prevent them from going home, being with their family. Despite that, Hashem had another plan, and he was able to execute the plan through the Jewish women. Listen to this beautiful, beautiful measure, such a beautiful measure, it's so touching. And as we read it, understand and remember what I told you at the very beginning, which is that this concept, whatever happened in Egypt, was a prototype for what happened to the Jewish people throughout history. Every single thing that happened there. The reason that we went into Golus, into exile, to have these difficult times, was so that we would become great. So that we would grow and become great. So listen to this beautiful medrash. And the medrash, I have to warn you, or I have to give you the heads up, is going to end with the word Zeh Keili vanveu. Zeh Keili, that this is my God. So watch as we see how Hashem believes in us, how Hashem takes care of us, how Hashem makes sure that the plans of the Egyptians do not come to fruition. Miyav kasher yanu isaken yabet. Darash Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says an amazing drasha. In the merit of the righteous women of that generation, the Jewish people were redeemed from Egypt. What did they do? Now picture the scene. The Jewish people, the women are home alone with their kids. The husbands are out in the field. Don't come home. They never come home. They're busy working. They sleep out in the fields. There's not a moment for them to have breathing space. There's nothing. There's no thought in their mind of going home. Terrible, terrible situation. What did these women do? Listen to how Hashem guided and helped them. So beautiful. When they would go out to draw water from a well, to drinking water, they would have, Hashem took care of them, amazing siyata d'shmaya, divine providence. As their buckets came up with the water, inside of those buckets, the buckets were not just filled with water, they were filled with small fish. As they would draw the water, half of it would be water, half of it would be fish. Now understand this. It's so beautiful. We need to understand what it means. They would take two pots. One pot filled with water, one pot filled with fish. And they would heat up these two massive pots. Each woman would do this for her husband. She would come out to the field where they were, all alone there, sleeping on the floor. She would warm up the water, and she would use that water to massage her husband, to calm him down from the back-breaking, difficult work that he was involved in. And she would give him food. She would give him the fish. These two great big pots would serve as cover for the woman and the man to be together, so that they could be able to conceive with children. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Im tishkevun ben shvatayim, kanfe yoina nechpa v'kesef. If you shall sleep between the shvatayim, the word shvatayim, as the Medrash understands it, is a reference to the fact that they would be together between these two massive pots. One of the Meforshim explains that this word, the root of shvatayim, the word refers to the fact that when you place a pot on a stove, it's called this word shvatayim. So the women, through their care for their husbands, through their encouragement of their husbands, they would be able to keep the Jewish people alive, to thwart the plan of Paro. Pharaoh decreed that these men shouldn't be in their homes, shouldn't be with their wives. HaKadosh Baruch Hu put in the minds and within the pots and the barrels that they were using to pull out the water, he put there the water and the fish for them to be able to eat, so they could survive and help their husbands. They would get pregnant, they would return home. וכיוון שהגיע הזמן מולידיהם. הולכס יולד ועשודה תחס התפוח, שנראה תחס התפוח הרתיחה. Now listen to this, because this is where we get to the Zeh Keili. He believes in me. He's helping me. He's always with me. These women would give birth. Now, what would happen when they give birth? They couldn't take care of their children at home, because if the Egyptians would find out that they have kids, those children would be thrown into the sea. They would be thrown, into the river. So what would they do? They would go back out to the field, and that's where they would give birth. Okay, now I'm going to share with you the second part of the Medrash. There's two different versions of it, and I'd like to share with you the second version, which is actually in Parsha Beshalach, on the pasuk of Zeh Keili Vanveu. This pasuk where the Jewish people said, "This is my God, and I shall glorify Him." Okay, so then she would go out to the field and she would give birth there. Listen to this amazing thing. Difficult to understand, but listen to the beauty of it. It's such a touching scene. She would go out and she would give birth. She would leave the Zeves Hanar. When it says the Kadosh Baruch Hu, she would leave the baby there and she would say, "Hashem, this child is yours." Out in the field. She would say, "Master of the world, I've done my part. Now you do your part." So she would give the child over to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Rabbi Yochanan says, the other one was Reish Lakish. This is Rabbi Yochanan, the two friends. Bar Plukta. Hashem Himself would come down in His honor, as it were. He would cut off the what's left over the belly button, what's left over the umbilical cord. He would wash them, take care of them. Very interesting, same lashon, same language as what the wife did for her husband. He washed her, she washed him, and she would rub oil on him, massage him. Hashem did that for these babies. Okay? He would have two bottles in his hand, as it were. Hashem would take care of these children and place in their mouths two bottles, one which was oil and one which was honey. They would grow in the field. It caused you to grow and become great out in the field. They would grow up, they would go back at a certain point to their homes, and the parents would be amazed. They couldn't believe it. This is their child. How did you survive? How did you come back? Who took care of you? Well, they would say, there was a young man, very beautiful. He would come down to the field and give us everything we needed. That's how HaKadosh Baruch Hu would appear to them as a young man, a strapping young man. Now listen to this, so beautiful. When they got to the sea, when they experienced that awesome nace, the sea split, they had the most awesome revelation of the highest realms. The highest realms, they saw, as it were. They were able to say, Zeh Keili Vanveu, this is my God. They pointed. Those children had grown up. They were there. They were at the sea. They saw Hashem as it were. They saw a vision at the sea. They said to their parents, "Daddy, Daddy, Mommy, that's the one. That's the one who took care of us. That's the one who took care of us when we were out in the fields, when we were in Egypt." They pointed and said, "This is my God." So beautiful. This is my God, and I will glorify Him. Think about it. There's this back and forth between the house and the field. Paro says, I don't want you to be in your homes. I don't want you to have children. I don't want them to grow. Despite the fact that they're out in the field, despite the fact that the field represents the exile from our home. It represents the Jewish people also. We have a home. It's called Eretz Yisrael. We've been exiled from our home. The Jews throughout Europe, throughout America, Australia, Africa, everywhere in the world. That represents the field. And when we go out into the field, it's impossible for us to have kids. It's impossible for us to continue. We're so far away from our home. We're so far away from our connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, is the place for our connection to Hashem. But Hashem sends out the women. Hashem sends out the women. The women represent the spiritual ones among us, who have the ability to remind us, don't give up. Don't get destroyed by the exile. Don't get destroyed by being out here in the field, by the inui, by the unparalleled difficulties that you're going through out here in the field. And they would bring, just like the woman would go out to the husband, Hashem, as it were, sends the Bnei Torah, those who are learning the Torah. Hashem sends the Gedolim, the great sages, the great leaders of the Jewish people, to remind us, to wash us, to give us food. The water is the Torah. The fish, just like a fish out of water. We're the Jewish people, if we don't have the Torah, if we don't have these spiritual teachings, we're like a fish out of water. That's what's represented there, in that mashal, in that analogy. The Jewish people, there we are. That's where we continue with the water of Torah, with the fish. The aspect of tznius, the fish represents Yosef. Not going to get into that right now. There we are, and there we grow, out in the field. Seems like we're not going to make it. We're all alone. We're left here alone. Back to the house. We get back to Eretz Yisrael. We're kicked out again. Back out to the field. And there we are out in the field, and Hashem is saying, I will take care of you. I will help you grow. Your mother and father don't seem to be here. You don't have those leaders, perhaps. You've lost your connection to your roots. But even out here in the field, even out here in the gullus, even out here in the exile, I'm here to take care of you and help you grow. I believe in you. I believe in you. I'm always with you. I'm always taking care of you. And it's here that you grow, like we saw. To the extent that they sent us out into the field, to the extent that they caused us to have so much pain, in a corresponding way, we became greater and greater. Not just then in the times of Egypt, throughout our history, up till today, up till our very times, up till this very challenge that we face right now, that has been with us for almost a year. This challenge seems to be getting more difficult. But no, understand, take to heart, the greater the challenge, the greater the difficulty, side by side with that is a revava, a tzemach. It's not a coincidence that just as the whole corona business was starting, the COVID business was starting in February of last year, there was the beginnings of a new way that the Middle East is going to look, that the Arab world is going to look at the Jewish people. And as we get into another stage of challenge and difficulty, things seem to be getting better with the vaccines, and things seem to be another version of it, something else getting harder, better, harder, same time. Know and understand, the harder it is, the more we grow. Hashem is bringing us through an amazing time, an unbelievable time, a challenging time. But we need to know that just as it was in Egypt, those challenges, we never forget Yetzias Mitzrayim. We never forget the exodus from Egypt. We never forget the slavery. Avodim Ayinu L'Parah Mitzrayim. We never forget that. Because we need to know, we need to remember that it's not just then, but it's also now. The challenges, the difficulties, the times when we feel we can't go on, those are the times that we grow from. Those are the times that something awesome is waiting on the other end. It's called a geula, it's called a redemption, it's called an exodus. So I want to bless you and ask you to bless me, that Hashem should help us to see, to know that He believes in us, that He is there helping us grow, that the challenges themselves are the root and the source of the greatness that we can achieve. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful Shemos.
This podcast was made possible through the gracious donations of listeners like you. For more podcasts like this, please visit www.arigoldwag.com or search on iTunes Ari Goldwag.